I'm Big Zay.
Morning, Brad.
Morning, boys. What's going on?
Well, very interesting game yesterday, very difficult game, just a very uneven game from the Bears. You know, they never felt like they were really in sync during the course of that game, and I'm talking both definitely offensively but also defensively.
Yeah, and it's maybe a much different game if they get one touchdown or certainly two touchdowns on those first two possessions. Instead of being up 6-0, you're talking about a chance to be up 10-0, 14-0. And when they fell short in the red zone and the high red zone and were unable to get in the end zone, you looked at it and you said, man, they're keeping a Baltimore team that was scuffling there from the start in this ball game, and before you knew it, the Ravens were ahead, and the Bears were forced to try to play catch up, which, as you know, fell short.
So, Brad, Caleb Williams was reluctant to say that it was a bad read on his fourth quarter interception, even though Kyle Monangai was open for the first down. Why do you think that he was reluctant like that, and how did you see the play unfold?
Well, Ben Johnson said it. He said he needed to look at the tape, but he thought they had somebody that was open, and that was a tight window and bad throw that was late. So you got one challenging aspect there, the tight window, and then you've got two elements on the play that were poor on Caleb's part, being late, throwing the ball behind the receiver a little bit, and then really the third thing is, late over the middle is like a double whammy, and they had hit a couple of those crossing routes earlier in the game, and Nate Wiggins was conscious of that. The cornerback, he said, I'm not going to let that happen again, and he made a play on the ball, and right there, Baltimore's in position for what was a 9-yard touchdown drive. You can't have that in that situation.
Brad, it was very interesting to hear Ben Johnson after the game talk about the 11 penalties and say that they've been hammering the drum all year long, and now it's time for the veteran players to take control of it. It was just a curious way for him to respond, given the fact that that really it's a discipline issue. It's a coaching issue. He does bear some responsibility with it, and they can't seem to get it right.
No, and the penalties, it's not like they're catching an overly officious crew, right? And you've got an instance where guys that love throwing the flags are catching Bears games. Every crew out there is dropping flags against the Bears, and they're averaging now, I believe it's 9.1 penalties per game. In the big picture, they're not terribly far off. Going into Week 8, the league average was 7.1 penalties per team per game. So you're talking about being two off, but they've got to fix that because they aren't good enough right now to overcome those kind of mistakes. And you see what happens now in a game where they don't get a bundle of takeaways, right? They look like a much different football team when they're making the normal errors that they've got going on here in terms of penalties and some of this pre-snap issues that continue to plague them, and it's going to be a problem until further notice. We can no longer look at the penalties and say, well, it's early in the season, it's a small sample size. They're 7 games in, and they can't seem to play clean football consistently.
Yeah, only Jacksonville has been penalized more. You're exactly right, Brad. Let's look at Caleb Williams again, because after the last 2 games, certainly the fan base, there's been a loss of confidence in what he's able to do and whether or not he might be the guy. Do you feel like Ben Johnson has had a loss of confidence in Caleb Williams, or where do you think the head coach stands when he looks at his quarterback?
I think that's a good question. Lack of confidence, I don't know. I think they probably take it week to week, but there's probably got to be, some level of frustration that things haven't started to uptick a little bit for him. It's been clunky for a lot of the season. He ends up with 285 yards yesterday. I want to say 62 or so came on that final possession and ended up short because he somehow missed DJ Moore uncovered in the back of the end zone and chalked it up to miscommunication with DJ, and it was miscommunication with Colston on the one of those intentional grounding penalties. I think he's probably got to tread lightly in terms of throwing other players' names out there for some of the mistakes that continue to pile up in his games. But the completion percentage isn't anywhere close to where they want him to be. They talked about 70%, and that's a very lofty goal. We talked about that at the beginning of the season, but 24 games into his career, he's had 4 instances of completing 70% of his passes, and I believe, I don't have the numbers in front of me, I believe 2 of those games came in situations where he didn't even throw for 150 yards in the game. So hard to say that he was really on as a passer in those games. So there's a lot of room for growth, and the Bears are going to need to see it. There's a lot of football left to be played this season, but it's not clicking there. And the usual excuses that you have for a Bears quarterback in terms of lack of skill position talent, poor offensive line, poor coaching, those he's not going to benefit from those. He's not going to get an excuse made for him that some of the quarterbacks that have come before him and failed had. You had to give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt before you said, this isn't going to cut it.
This segment with Brad Biggs is sponsored by Estwing Professional Tools, made in the USA for over 100 years, estwing.com. So, Brad, we saw a couple of injuries during the game on the defensive line. Does that mean that that Austin Booker is now going to be upgraded to the roster today? Not that he wasn't going to be, but they've waited their time. Makes you wonder how Dennis Allen feels about him.
Yeah, I mean, the Booker move will happen. The deadline's tomorrow, so whether that happens today or tomorrow, that's going to go down. He's going to be in the mix and returning at a time when potentially he'll be needed, depending on what they determine with Shamar Turner with a knee and Dominique Robinson with an ankle injury. But welcome back, Austin. Here's your opportunity to show if you can be impactful as you were during some of the preseason action before he injured his knee. So they've got that move to make, possibly a decision on the linebacker Imagn Bamiga this week in his return from IR, and they've got a couple wide receivers that didn't finish the game, and Luther Burden and OZ. So they've got those kind of things. They can add up for teams during a season, and you can be hit at one position with a couple of them, and the Bears are dealing with it now at 3 positions when you talk about cornerback, defensive end, and wide receiver.
Brad, one of the things that I think we haven't talked about much, and I wonder if you ever got a good explanation for after the game, Torrey Taylor had pinned the Ravens down to the 1-yard line, and then it turned out they had to punt again because of an illegal formation on a punt. And then it was a 21-yard difference in where they took over the 22 rather than the 1-yard line. They went down, they had a field goal, might have been a factor. What was the call on that? Is that one of those things that just shrug your shoulders?
Yeah, I would guess that they didn't have enough men on the line of scrimmage, but I don't know that for fact. And it's you're right, it's a killer penalty because he just hit a marvelous ball to have them pinned on the 1-yard line there. Would have completely changed the complexion of the start of that drive for the Ravens offense, and that's something I took note of after the game. 3 of their 11 penalties came on special teams, and I think it would have been fair to say that through the first 6 games with the penalty issues that the Bears have had, that special teams had been relatively clean. Like you weren't getting to an end of the game and saying, geez, more penalties on special teams that had been, kind of isolated to the offense and the defense. But yesterday, too many penalties on special teams, and that was one of the real big ones in the game for the Bears.
And I think, Brad, being fair about it, you have to consider the idea that so many people are out injured. You're moving new guys into starting rotation who are secondary players, whatever, who might be special teams guys, and you're bringing up guys that are performing on special teams. I'm just saying, sometimes when people haven't really been tested or able to play or required to play, you do get special teams errors there too.
Yeah, you can, but DeMarco Jackson's a veteran. They got him from this after the Saints cut him loose because he was a top tier special teams performer in New Orleans, and you just can't have that. And I'm sure Richard Hightower would echo the same thing. So they got a lot to clean up. Coming off a 4-game winning streak that was super impressive. They hadn't lost in a long time when you factor the bye in there. So it's try to fix some of these things. Certainly key in on the penalties, but I'll remind you what I guys said earlier. They look like a much different football team when they're not getting the takeaways in bunches. Jacksonville rolled off 4 wins in a row earlier this season with a similar calculus. Like they were getting takeaways in bunches and bunches, and the takeaways dried up. And Jacksonville wasn't just losing; they were getting blown out a little bit.
Does Ozzie Trapillo, being the guy in motion, the fullback / tight end, expose a hole on the roster or show his versatility?
That's just a little, wrinkle in the playbook. I don't think you have a hole on the roster without a fullback. Majority of the league is not carrying a fullback these days, and we've seen the tight ends.
Saw one yesterday.
You saw Durham Smythe in the backfield. They don't need to go back to 1980s Hoosier prep football.
You got to tackle in motion, Brad. I'm asking. Come on.
You're asking if it exposes a hole on the roster, and I'm saying that Ben Johnson's offense did just fine in Detroit without a fullback.
Okay. Good answer.
Well, what's funny about it is you did see one yesterday, and we were kind of laughing because they said he's one of the best ones in the league. There's only like a handful of them
3.
in the league.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
They honestly have to. And I hate to say this because I've gotten to know a handful of these fullbacks over the years, and they've all been terrific guys. But
yes,
it's about time they take the Pro Bowl away from the fullback. If there's only a half dozen of them, what are you going to do?
Fastest way to the Pro Bowl. Brad, obviously a disappointment, and yet they've got Cincinnati coming up. What is your expectation level with Cincinnati, sans Joe Burrow, but with great receivers and with Flacco throwing the ball down the field? They somehow lost to Justin Fields, but that is a team that's put up a lot of points.
Yeah, Joe Flacco bombed the Bears for 212 yards in the fourth quarter just 2 years ago when he was in Cleveland. My expectation right now is for Jamar Chase to get about 37 targets on Sunday. Okay, maybe not quite that many, but I believe he's got more than 40 targets over the last 2 games. I think he had 19 targets yesterday, 12 catches, 90 some odd yards. So they weren't breaking anything big with Chase yesterday, but in all seriousness, the Bears are going to have to burn the midnight oil and coming up with a way to try to prevent Chase from going big against them, because Flacco is going to find him and he's going to throw the ball to him, and he's going to do it time and time and time again.
Do the Bengals have a fullback? We know you got to go, Brad. Have a safe trip.
Thanks, guys. Have
You're
a great
the best.
day.
All right, Bigsy. Thank you.